Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Business of Inner Peace. So excited and honored today to have Miss Debbie Weiss on. She is a best-selling author, a coach, a speaker, and a fellow podcaster. And she's inspiring women to take control of their lives by harnessing their inner power, regardless of their circumstances. And I'm just going to add, regardless of their age, because she's such an inspiration.
Welcome to the Business of Inner Peace. I'm your host, Erin Jean, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's pretend we're sitting in my living room enjoying a cup of coffee or tea and getting to know each other just a little better. That's what I love. I love getting to hear your story. I love feeling connected by the spirit of understanding that our stories bring. Today, I'm sharing some of my story, but I hope someday soon you'll be telling me yours. Listen, I know that you're feeling overwhelmed with life, and nothing is exactly how you'd like it to be. Your marriage is not what you hoped for, motherhood is harder than you imagined, and you've lost yourself somewhere in the mix of responsibilities. Well, if you're ready to bring some more peace and joy into your life, reconnect with God who made you, and start living a life you love, then grab your cup of coffee or tea and let's dive into today's show.
Welcome, Debbie.
Erin, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
So I recently published my memoir called On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, and it's an inspirational story about overcoming your limiting beliefs and the struggles that you've had in life. And regardless of your circumstances or your age, I kind of had an epiphany around the age of 50 and, have kind of gone from there. So that's the crux of it.
And what kind of, what sort of led you on your path to that epiphany?
So when I was 50, so let me just go back and say, I have been a family caregiver for over 40 years. So my dad had a stroke when I was 17 and he was 45, a major stroke. He lived. But my parents soon got divorced after that. And so then he was my responsibility for 30 years of his life. And then I have two sons. When my oldest son was about 15 months or a little older, he was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum. So that was and still is. And now he also suffers from mental illness. That was tremendous. And then my husband had a lot of physical illness and then more mental illness later in his life. And he actually passed away 10 months ago today, December 30th, 2022. So I was his caregiver as well for an extended period of time. So when I turned 50, which was 10 years ago, so my husband was okay at that point, my friends insisted that we go away, which was great. And it was the first time in my adult life that I kind of got to focus on myself and something about, and realizing through our conversation that I had really lost myself. And also something about the 50 number kind of made me stop and think about where my life was and where it was headed. And thinking about if I, God forbid, were to die today, I would be looking back with regret. Not regret that I cared for any of my family members, but regret that I didn't also care for myself. And I could, kind of this epiphany, they're not exclusive just because I've had, and those are just part of the circumstances that I've had, but, I was viewing myself as a victim of my circumstances, thinking that I had no power to do anything to change the direction of my life, kind of like, this is what happened to me. This is just the way it is. And so I'll just ride it out, not in a negative way, but, never thinking that I could kind of take hold of the reins and steer it maybe in the direction that I wanted. And I had no idea what that direction was.
Yeah. So what did you do? I'm like,
So,
once you sort of came to that epiphany, what was your path?
so it was like slow and windy, and I'm still on it. It started with, so I've always had a weight problem. So it started with approaching my health and my weight loss differently than I ever had before. And it was kind of a mindset shift of get out of that perfectionist thinking that all or nothing, I'm on the diet, I'm off the diet kind of thing. Forget, oh my gosh, I want to lose X amount by 3 months from now, by the summer, that's all done. When I went back to kind of, that it's a lifestyle, accepting it was a lifestyle, stop thinking that, oh, poor me, why do I have to deal with this? Look at that person. She never struggled, even though I had no idea what her situation was. And so that was kind of the first thing, even though I have not gotten to my goal yet. I've come pretty close and have at least maintained it, which had never happened for maybe like 6 years or so now. And so when I saw, all I did was change the way I was approaching it, I then started actually a lot of my change since then have been the result of listening to podcasts and listening to people. And so I wound up listening. I never even know what a podcast was. I had a friend who was listening. I'm like, who the hell are you listening to? These strangers? Like, why are you even listening to these? What am I even going to listen to? How do I even pick? And she's like, well, just search something, So of course I searched weight loss. And that led me to a woman who was just general mindset. And, listening to her, I couldn't wait every time something came out. That was kind of like my introduction. I didn't know a thing what personal development was. And so that was kind of how I got into it. And then, I took her course and, so it kind of like, then it's a whole path from there. But even down to, I never wanted to write a book. I never dreamt I was going to write a book. Like, I just really started listening to my gut and going in directions I never dreamed of before. And I heard the way I wrote the book was through taking another course for first-time authors. And how did I get there? By a different podcast, listening to that woman being interviewed.
Oh, that's so cool. I really love that. It makes me so curious, right? Like, how many people are out there?
Exactly.
Don't even know that this world exists.
Exactly. And that's what I have to keep reminding myself. Like, I think that's what now as I'm moving forward. So I'm launching my first group coaching program in January. And it's like, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm trying to reach those people who didn't even know this existed, like me. I'm not looking to reach the person who's been into personal development for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find someone like me who didn't know there was another way, who was blaming whatever circumstances they had in their life, oh, poor me, I'm a widow. Now, I'm a widow, I'm divorced, I'm a single mom, I was, abused, whatever it is. Like, we all have stuff. That's life. But that doesn't mean that you don't have control.
Yeah. So if you were going to describe like your sort of before mindset compared to your mindset now, how would you describe it?
Totally. My mindset was, I am just a victim of my circumstances. I have no control, kind of see where the tide is going to take me, not realizing that I could steer the ship. And I never thought that I don't think I ever even like dreamt about what was possible. I just thought, this is it, I'm middle-aged and I'm very lucky. I have, my kids and all the things. And now I completely think that anything is possible.
Oh my God.
Nothing is off the table. Nothing.
That is so cool. Like that makes approaching 50 and midlife or whatever you want to call it, I think it makes it really exciting because you have this opportunity still, like no matter what age you are, to just completely reinvent yourself. I mean, if you would have told yourself like even 5 years ago,
Oh my gosh.
right? Would you even have believed that?
Not a chance in hell. Not a chance. The single thing that I'm doing now. I mean, really the biggest transformation like happened since I would say like 2019, maybe. Yeah, I have to go back and look to see when I took her course. Feel like it might have been 2019, maybe 18, that kind of set me down the path. And I was such a skeptic. Like I remember signing up for her course and I was new to this online world. So I remember seeing the price tag and I was like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Like this woman is just here to rip me off. That's really how I approached it. But I kept like something kept drawing me back to look at it again and to look at it again. And, you know, I think over my life, the one thing that I have gotten better at is listening to my gut and noticing and that's why I wound up writing the book. If something keeps showing itself to me, it's there for a reason and trust it.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt with that course.
Yes, I feel like something happens to us in childhood and in our society where we are almost raised to stop listening to that part of ourselves. Like we're taught to stop.
Yeah.
And you hear so many people's stories about how like they sort of knew or they had a feeling about something and then they pushed it down and then like something bad happened. Or vice versa, what you're talking about, where you're just listening to something and it pushed you forward and it has completely changed your life. Right?
Yep.
I wish I could peg that for people. Like that would be really cool to start identifying what is it in society? Like why do we do this to children to get them to stop listening to that part of themselves?
I feel like, I mean, I think about my youngest son, who's a junior in college. And, you know, I didn't tell him this, but he has it in his head. And I think it's a societal thing. Like, I need to do this and this to make money. You know, I need to be successful. This is what success is. And maybe it is something that was taught because it wasn't like I was an entrepreneur as he was growing up. And he and my older ones see what I'm doing now. And I do think it has an effect, but it doesn't matter because he's decided himself, he's got to get good grades to go to a good, This is just the path. And even though I've said it to him a million times, like, listen to what you want, what do you want? And he'll say, he wants to be, do something in sports, like be a basketball coach or be a sports agent or whatever. He doesn't, he can't.
Yeah.
How am I going to do that? I don't have any connections, blah, blah. And look, if you don't have, I think the difference is if you don't have the drive and the commitment and the determination, you're right, you're not going to do it. I mean, that's the thing. It's not magic. There's a lot in there. So I think then instead he thinks to himself, well, forget that. So I might as well just figure out what I'm good at so I can go make some money.
Yeah. I don't remember who said it, but that saying of whether or not you think you can or you can't.
It's Henry Ford because I use it in my presentation. I love that. So it's so true.
It really is true. And I feel like you were sort of leaning towards saying at the beginning of when you were sharing that essentially it's your thoughts. It's your whole thought process that changed everything, thinking about things differently.
Totally.
That's the switch.
That's the switch.
That's the flip. I think where people struggle is like they can recognize the thought that the thoughts are not positive, but I don't think they really fully grasp how to stop that,
Yeah.
how to turn it around. So what would be your advice to someone? I'm like, okay, you recognize the thought's bad or negative or however you want to label it. Now what?
Well, it's funny because the name of my book kind of comes from this, because it's on second thought, maybe I can. Because anytime anything was presented to me, or my own thought, like, oh, maybe I can do that, my first reaction was always, I can't do that. There's a reason I can't. But if we each then just recognize that, take a beat, take a pause and say, on second thought, why can't I? Here's proof. I've done this. Other people, I always, a thing that always like helps me personally is like, it's almost like when I had, when I was nervous about giving birth the first time I was pregnant, I kept telling myself, a million other people have done it, so why can't I do it? It's kind of that thing. I think actually the awareness is the hardest part. Becoming aware of like our thoughts is the hardest part, but catching it and learning to reframe the thought is really what we need to do.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's actually what I teach my clients, is that you need to find, your brain has to find evidence of how you can. And that's part of like rewiring the subconscious, right? So you can even find evidence in that you've seen someone else do it. Like, have you heard about the story where like no human could break the 4-minute mile?
Yes. And then someone does, and now everybody's running 4 minutes.
Yeah, under 4. And it's like we needed collective evidence that it was possible. And that's really what the brain needs, because you'll get stuck on something sometimes, and you have to find evidence for your brain of where you did succeed. So if you're worried about failing something, right, you're like, even if it's something totally unrelated, I feel like finding evidence for your brain of where you did something successful is like what you got to latch on to. Would you?
Totally. Oh, I totally agree. You know how people say, I forget who it was, like calls it a badass list, but I say it's a maybe I can list. Like, you make a list of all the things, and I did do it back, whenever I first heard it. And it's like, I don't really have anything that I did that was so, overcoming anything. And then it's like, oh, well, wait a second. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And just the act of doing that, I think, is really powerful, because, you remind yourself, yeah, look what I did overcome, or look what I did do that was difficult. And that gives you, the courage to move forward.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, there's so many things in your story that are evidence that you can do hard things.
Yeah.
I'm like, look at you go. Like, you can do hard things.
I can. Well, sometimes now I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like too many things going on. Yesterday I started writing book number 2. So the writing is hard.
Yeah. Did you like, is there anything in you that did like writing when you were younger? Like, were you?
Nope. Zero. Nothing. I'm a math person. I'm a CPA by trade. I don't do it anymore. Now I'm an insurance agent, but I practiced accounting for 10 years. Zero. Nothing. I'd be that person like in college, if I had to take an elective that wasn't business, it was like, do you have to write a paper in this class? Because if so, I'm not taking it.
That's funny. You're like, I'm out.
I'm out.
So, okay, obviously the course you took then really helped you.
It did.
But what's like your routine to write? What do you do?
So I actually wrote my memoir while my husband was dying. And it kind of happened because, again, I was kind of listening to the signs. And then the woman I heard on the podcast, her course was starting. And I remember I said to my therapist at the time, like, I must be out of my freaking mind for even thinking about doing this at such a time. So in June of last year, my husband was diagnosed with the terminal blood cancer. And we didn't know what was going to happen. You know, everything was evolving. And she said, I actually think this is the perfect time for you to do this because you need something separate for yourself outside of what's going on to focus on. And I was worried about being the perfect student. And what if I couldn't show up because of Gary? And what if I, didn't do the homework and whatever? And I had to get over that. And what wound up happening was I really committed to writing regularly. So I would, and actually I just did it right before you, they would have like co-writing times where you would go on Zoom at a specified time, just say hello, someone would set a timer, turn your camera off and write. And it was that accountability piece. So I did as many of them as I could, and that's what I plan on doing now as well. And when they weren't offered or I couldn't fit it into my schedule, I would find, another time. So I'm going to write today at 6 a.m. I'm going to write at 12, and I would tell my husband, I'm going upstairs for an hour. Don't bother me, unless it's an emergency. And that's what I would do. So I really stuck to those, small amounts of writing time on a regular basis. I was dedicated because you have to be. Otherwise, regular life is going on around you. And like I said, sometimes you sit there and you don't know what the hell you're going to say when you're writing. And it's like, oh gosh. And other times, it comes easily. So sometimes it can be frustrating.
Yeah. Wow. I think you can use that and apply it to any task.
Absolutely. 1,000%. And I realized, as I'm trying now to get back into it, I'm out of practice. It's like anything. You get into a routine and that's your new normal. And when you lose that, I think you get back into it quicker when you re-engage if it's something that you've already done and been successful with. But, it's a process and I'm out of like the writing habit. It's something, I don't know, just about, I think when you do it regularly, it flows a little easier.
Kind of like exercise.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly right. Totally.
You just you gotta do it. So,
yep.
I think having a mantra helps. Like, is there anything you tell yourself when you're not wanting to?
Not really. The only thing that I have this little story about how growing up, like in yearbooks and stuff, when even like 6th grade, 8th grade, they'd be like, okay, here's your picture and what is your favorite quote? And I'd be like, favorite quote? I don't have a favorite quote. Like 13 years old, I have a favorite quote that I live by. It kind of pissed me off. Like, how do all these young kids not have a quote? What's wrong with me? And so a few years ago, when I was kind of going through this process, all of a sudden this like phrase popped in my head and I was like, damn, that is good. I wonder if I just made that up. Let me Google. And of course, I didn't make it up. It's a quote from Glinda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz when she says, you've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself. And I had only, how many times have I heard it? And I only really thought about it on like face value, like Dorothy, just click your heels and say you want to go home. You could have done that at any time. But then that one day when I read it, it was like, that was kind of my aha. That was, I think, a quote that really just summarized the aha. Like, it's in here. You just had to know it. You had to learn it, that you had it the whole time, but you weren't realizing that. And now that you have, it's your responsibility to make it happen. So I think maybe I don't have a mantra, but I think that that's probably what pops into my head, that phrase a lot, or that quote.
I love that. And there's so much truth to that, because I think everybody that's on the other side of something huge kind of has that truth in their story, where I can recognize when I shifted out of a victim mindset.
Yep.
Stopped looking for someone else to save me from my situation. That's when everything changed. I was like, I was the savior I was waiting for.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, that's good. I like it.
Thank you.
So where do you want to send people to connect with you?
So my website, I have, I think, well, on my website, I have like 3 or 4 different downloads, free downloads, different stuff there. And right now, depending on, when it was, right now, I have a waiting list for my coaching program, but it's going to open by the end of November to join.
That's exciting. What a great way to kick off the new year.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to start, the first January 8th.
I love it. Awesome. So what is your website?
It is Debbie, Debbie, middle initial R. That's the important part. And then Weiss, WEISS.com. So DebbieRWeiss.com.
And tell me about your podcast.
So it's the Maybe I Can podcast. I launched it May 1st.
Okay.
And it is, I'm doing a combination of, it's weekly, individual episodes and guests, and, with the idea of providing tools people can use to make the transformation, and then the guests who have their own stories of transformation.
Well, I've loved every minute of getting to talk with you. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're feeling blessed by the content here, the number one way you can show me is by leaving me a written review of the show. I'd be forever grateful. Knowing that you're out there listening helps me know that I'm truly living out God's purpose in my life. The other thing you can do is take a screenshot of this episode, share it with a friend, or better yet, tag me on your Instagram stories. Remember, you are seen, known, and loved. May God richly bless you today. All my love, Erin Jean.